My parents laughed when I used my $38,000 savings to buy Grandpa's bee farm. A year later, they handed out samples like it was theirs, until I revealed the blue ribbon with only my name on it. I stood alone, the last one left at Grandpa Henry's graveside, feeling the biting wind and a raw ache in my chest. While my family practically sprinted for their cars, eager to put him and his burden of a farm behind them, I clutched a small jar of honey, a silent, fierce promise forming inside me that would soon turn into the biggest fight of my life. I remember tracing the rough grain of Grandpa's simple wooden casket, the late afternoon sun catching the honey in my hand, turning it into liquid gold. Everyone else was already gone, relief practically radiating from their hurried steps. It felt like a betrayal. Some inheritances, I whispered to the cool autumn breeze, aren't measured in dollars and cents. I was transported back to being 8 years old, sitting on Grandpa's lap, giggling as he let me dip my finger into fresh honeycomb. The sweetness, the way he explained how bees transformed nectar into treasure, that was before my family decided Honey Ridge Farm was just a burden, not a blessing. Before they convinced him to let it slowly die. The attorney's office smelled exactly as you'd imagine, old leather and musty books. Mr. Livingston sat behind a heavy mahogany desk, a fortress between him and our tiny family unit. Mom, ever the picture of polite impatience, kept adjusting her pearl necklace, her eyes darting to the clock. Dad was already shifting, his starched collar wilting, clearly annoyed by the formality. And Delia? My sister was just tapping away on her phone, not even pretending to care. Now then, Mr. Livingston cleared his throat, unfolding the document with careful, deliberate hands. Regarding the property known as Honey Ridge Farm, just tell us what it's worth so we can sell, Dad interrupted, his voice carrying that same dismissive tone he'd used about Grandpa's farm for 20 years. Delia barely looked up. Agreed. Liquidate and distribute. Simple. But Mr. Livingston just peered over his reading glasses. Actually, your father was quite specific about his wishes. He adjusted the papers. The property is to be held jointly by the family unless one member wishes to purchase the other's shares. Mom sighed dramatically. Who would want a derelict bee farm? It's been abandoned for years. We'd be lucky to get anything for it. The county assessment values it at approximately $95,000, he replied. Delia snorted. Who would pay that for a collapsing farmhouse and dead bee boxes? I watched them, my own family, dismissing Grandpa's legacy without a second thought. Something twisted in my chest, that familiar ache of watching them undervalue what mattered to me. Like the 5th grade science fair project Delia claimed she'd helped with, she'd merely glanced at it before my parents showered her with praise. Or the way they beamed at her corporate promotions, while my administrative job was just sensible and practical, their code for hopelessly unambitious. What they didn't know was that beneath my practical exterior lay 6 years of quiet rebellion. 6 years of brown bag lunches, thrift store clothes, and a tiny, shared apartment. 6 years of saying no to vacations and dinners out. 6 years of watching my savings account grow while they just assumed I was barely getting by. I'll buy it, I said, the words escaping before I could even reconsider. 3 heads snapped toward me. Surprise, then amusement, crossed their faces. You'll what? Dad asked, his eyebrows nearly disappearing into his hairline. I'll buy your shares. $62,000 over 3 years. Delia's laughter started, sharp and dismissive. With what money? Your administrative salary barely covers rent in Portland. Mom reached over, patting my hand as if I were a child. Honey, you don't know the first thing about farming. And beekeeping? It's complicated, specialized work. Their laughter burned, but I was ready. I'd prepared for this moment without even knowing it. I reached into my bag and withdrew a bank statement, sliding it across the polished desk. $25,000 down payment today, the rest in monthly installments. My voice was steady. I can sign the contract right now. The laughter stopped dead. Dad picked up the statement, squinting at the balance. $38, $462.17. Where did you get this money? He demanded. I saved it, I told him, meeting his gaze. For 6 years. Every paycheck. Delia snatched the paper. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly maintain that property. It'll be foreclosed in a year, and you'll have wasted everything. I turned to Mr. Livingston. Please prepare the paperwork. Miriam, be reasonable, Mom pleaded. That money could be a down payment on a real house, not some fantasy about rescuing a dead farm. I straightened my shoulders. It's not a fantasy. It's Grandpa's legacy. Fine. Delia tossed the statement back at me. Take it. You'll fail, and we won't bail you out when you come crawling back. Then you have nothing to lose by signing, I replied, surprising even myself with the calm in my voice. Mr. Livingston cleared his throat. I can have the papers ready within the hour if that's amenable to everyone. Dad looked at Mom, who just shrugged with exasperation. Let her learn the hard way. An hour later, I stood outside the attorney's office, a folder of signed documents clutched to my chest. Rain began to fall, gentle at first, then heavier, but I didn't open my umbrella. The cold drops seeped through my blouse, but I barely noticed. For the first time in my adult life, I had chosen my own path instead of the one laid out for me. The farm, my farm, now waited for me, broken and abandoned. Like me, it had been overlooked, underestimated, forgotten. But beneath the neglect, I knew something vital still lived, just waiting for someone who believed enough to bring it back. I looked up into the rain, letting it wash the tension from my face. A honeybee hovered impossibly near, sheltering under the building's small awning, its wings catching what little light remained in the stormy afternoon. We'll make it, I whispered. To the bee. To Grandpa. To myself. Watch me. The very next day, my second-hand pickup truck groaned as I navigated the rutted dirt road leading to Honey Ridge Farm. Each pothole jolted through my spine, a physical reminder of exactly what I'd gotten myself into. The truck, a faded blue Chevy with more rust than paint, had cost nearly all my remaining cash after the down payment. $8,000 left to my name, and a property that looked like it had been abandoned for decades, not just years. My stomach knotted as I pulled up to the farmhouse. The white paint had surrendered to the weather, peeling away in long strips like discarded snakeskin. The porch sagged in the middle, a toothless smile of broken boards and missing railings. Tall grass and wild blackberry vines swallowed the lower half of the structure. What have I done? I whispered, clutching the steering wheel until my knuckles blanched. I forced myself out of the truck, my boots crunching on gravel and broken glass. The late April sun beat down as I surveyed what was now mine, overgrown fields stretching toward distant tree lines, collapsed wooden structures that must have been beehives, equipment rusted beyond recognition. Something tightens in my throat as I approach the weathered shed behind the house. The padlock on the door was new. Grandpa must have replaced it before he got too sick to visit. I fumbled with the key from the attorney's envelope and pushed open the creaking door. The smell hit me first, beeswax and wood, sweet and earthy. Dust motes danced in sunlight streaming through grimy windows. Tools hung on the walls in perfect order, untouched for years, but meticulously arranged. A workbench spanned one wall, jars of unidentifiable substances lined up like soldiers. My fingers brushed over a leather-bound book centered on the workbench, Honey Ridge Journal, 1974 to 2018. I opened it to find Grandpa's handwriting, neat and precise, chronicling decades of bee colonies, honey production, and weather patterns. I thought the Collins family sold this place years ago. I startled, dropping the journal with a thud. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, her silver hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, eyes sharp despite the wrinkles surrounding them. Mrs. Jenkins? Recognition flickered as childhood memories surfaced. I'm Miriam, Henry's granddaughter. I know who you are. She stepped into the shed, appraising me with a critical eye. You were the quiet one, always following Henry around with those big eyes, asking questions. I nodded, surprised she remembered. I bought the farm for my family. Bought it? Her eyebrows shot up. Well, that explains why your father looked like he'd swallowed something sour at the funeral. Man never did appreciate what Henry built here. My laugh came out hollow. None of them did. Mrs. Jenkins moved closer, examining the journal. Your grandfather created something special with those bees. Had a way with them nobody else did. I don't know the first thing about beekeeping, I admitted, the reality of my situation sinking deeper. But I couldn't let it go to developers. She studied me, her head tilted. You need to find Thomas Hale. He was your grandfather's right hand for 20 years. Thomas Hale. The name sounded vaguely familiar. Ornery old cuss who knows more about bees than most books. Works part-time at Peterson's Hardware in town. She headed toward the door. Find him. He's your only shot at making this place work again. 2 days later, I spotted him at the hardware store, tall and lean, with weather-beaten skin and steel-gray hair tucked under a faded baseball cap. He was explaining something about wood glue to a customer, his hands moving in precise, economical gestures. I waited until the customer left before approaching. Mr. Hale? I'm Miriam Ross. Henry Collins was my grandfather. And? His face hardened instantly. Collins' family never cared about those bees. 20 years of work. Abandoned like yesterday's newspaper. I bought the farm, I said, the words still strange on my tongue, from my parents and sister. He snorted. Good luck with that, city girl. I pulled Grandpa's journal from my bag and opened it to the last page. A loose sheet fell out, a handwritten note in shaky script. Thomas knows the secret. Trust him with Honeyridge. Something in Thomas's weathered face softened as he took the paper, his fingers tracing Grandpa's handwriting. His eyes, pale blue and sharp, studied me with renewed interest. You're serious about this? Not just looking to flip the property. I put down my life savings, I answered. I have exactly $13,000 left, a farm I don't know how to run, and a family waiting for me to fail. The next morning, Thomas met me at Honeyridge. We walked the property in methodical rows, his notebook filling with observations. He stopped at each collapsed hive, occasionally salvaging a piece of equipment or a frame. I don't have skills, I told him bluntly as we rested beneath an ancient oak tree. Just determination and what's left of my savings. I can offer you $15 an hour. No favors. Fair wages. We rebuild together, or not at all. Thomas studied me carefully, the silence stretching between us. Bees know when someone's honest, he finally said. They can sense intention. Your grandfather understood that. Then, he pointed toward a distant tree where something dark clustered against the trunk. See that? Wild swarm. Your grandfather's bees never really left. They've been waiting. The next week absolutely crushed what little optimism I'd mustered. The bank loan officer barely glanced at my business proposal before rejecting it. Too risky for conventional financing, he explained, not meeting my eyes. I tacked a calendar to the farmhouse kitchen wall, circling the date 10 months away when my first payment to the family was due. My phone buzzed constantly with Delia's texts. Given up yet? Ready to sell? You could still recover some of your investment. I ignored them all. Thomas arrived each morning at 7, teaching me beekeeping fundamentals between clearing overgrowth and repairing equipment. His patience never wavered as I fumbled with smokers and protective gear. When he discovered Grandpa's queen breeding records tucked behind a loose board in the shed, his eyes lit up. This is worth more than gold if we can resurrect this lineage, he breathed. Henry was breeding for disease resistance decades before it became standard practice. One evening, as sunset painted the sky amber and gold, we cleared the final section of overgrown brush near the eastern property line. Water glistened in the fading light. A spring-fed pond I never knew existed, hidden by years of neglect. Perfect spot for the first new hive, Thomas said, satisfaction warming his voice. Protected, south-facing, near water and a flowering meadow. 2 days later, we positioned the rebuilt hive near the pond. Thomas showed me how to examine the wild swarm from the oak tree, his movements gentle and precise. Look here, he whispered, pointing to a marked queen. She's carrying Henry's original strain. Notice the coloration, the size. I stared in wonder at the tiny insect, barely larger than the workers surrounding her. How is that possible after all these years? Thomas's eyes crinkled at the corners. Henry always said patience outlasts ridicule. He was right about most things. That night, I slept in the farmhouse for the first time. No electricity yet, but the spring water ran clear, and candles illuminated the kitchen where I wrote in my own journal by flickering light. Outside, crickets sang to the moon, while somewhere in the darkness, Grandpa's bees had come home. So had I. By the end of the summer, the FSA microloan approval letter trembled in my hands. $25,000. The number blurred as tears welled up, but I blinked them away. No time for that. We did it, Thomas. I passed the letter to him across the newly installed pine table in the farmhouse kitchen. You're officially farm operations manager now. Thomas adjusted his reading glasses, his weathered hands gentle with the paper. His eyes scanned the document, a smile creasing the corners of his mouth. Never doubted it for a minute. Rain pounded against the new tin roof, the steady drumming a reminder of how far we'd come. Just last week, Thomas and I had huddled under tarps while local contractors rushed to finish installation before the summer storm hit. Now we sat dry and warm as water streamed from the eaves. Remember when you wouldn't even come inside this house? Thomas chuckled, folding the letter carefully. Said it was too depressing. That was before we had running water and electricity, I reminded him, rubbing my calloused palms together, still surprised by their roughness after months of farm work. Speaking of water, the well test came back clean. Another item checked off. Outside, 12 new beehives stood in neat rows along the eastern edge of the property, their white boxes gleaming against the backdrop of Douglas firs. Each morning I walked the line, watching workers zoom in and out like tiny commuters rushing to important meetings. Henry's bees, thriving again. I slid the Honey Ridge Farm LLC registration certificate across the table, official as of yesterday. Thomas tapped the paper with his index finger. Your grandfather would bust his buttons seeing this, especially those 64 jars of honey we bottled yesterday. The memory of our first harvest warmed me from within, the golden liquid flowing from the extractor, Thomas teaching me to strain it through cheesecloth. The sweet aroma filling the workshop as we filled jar after jar with wildflower honey. Premium quality, Thomas declared. Best he'd seen in years. My phone buzzed with a notification. The group text I'd sent inviting Mom, Dad, and Delia to the Honey Ridge Revival Day showed 3 red receipts. 3 gray dots. 0 responses. Thomas watched my face fall but said nothing. I forced a smile and pocketed the phone. Their loss, I said, the words sounding more confident than I felt. Later that evening, as I was labeling honey jars in the workshop, my phone pinged again. A photo appeared, Mom, Dad, and Delia clinking champagne glasses at some fancy restaurant. The caption read, celebrating Delia's Financial Innovation Award. So proud. Mom's follow-up text appeared seconds later, our proudest daughter. Hearts and celebration emojis trailed after the words like confetti. My throat tightened. Thomas, organizing supplies across the room, glanced over as my phone clattered onto the workbench. Family? He asked, already knowing the answer. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Thomas walked over, picking up a jar of honey and holding it to the light. You know something about bees that might help? They don't need applause to make honey. They just do the work. The phone rang 2 days later. Mom, inviting me to dinner at their house. Just family, she said. Her voice carried that artificial brightness she used when there's an agenda. Delia specifically asked if you could make it. Alarm bells rang in my head, but curiosity won. I accepted. Dad poured wine while Mom fussed with a roast that had clearly been catered. Delia sat across from me, her designer outfit impeccable, her smile calculating. So, she said after Mom served the salad. The farm. Show me the books. I nearly choked on a cherry tomato. The books? Financial records. Business plan. Projections. She ticked them off on manicured fingers. I've been thinking. This could be interesting if structured properly. Dad nodded enthusiastically. Delia's been telling us her ideas. Makes a lot of sense. I could handle the finances while you do the fieldwork, Delia continued, leaning forward. Let's make it a Ross sisters venture. I know investors who'd jump at this. The family farm angle is marketing gold. Mom beamed at her. Delia's business expertise would take this hobby to the next level, honey. It's not a hobby, I said quietly, setting down my fork. It's a viable business with a solid plan and a partner I trust. This Thomas person? Dad waved dismissively. What does he know about modern business practices? He knows bees, I answered, and loyalty. Delia's smile hardened. Miriam, be practical. You need me. I stood, folding my napkin. Thank you for dinner. I need to get back to check the hives. Their protests followed me to the door, but I didn't look back. Outside, Thomas's truck idled at the curb. He rolled down the window, nodding at my surprised expression. Figured you might need a ride, he said simply. People only show up when they smell honey. A week passed. The reporter from Oregon Life and Farm arrived unannounced, her camera slung over her shoulder. Your neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, told me about what you're doing here, she explained, gazing at the transformed property. Mind if I do a feature? The article ran the following Sunday. Granddaughter revives Oregon's forgotten bee farm. The photo spread captured Thomas showing me Grandpa's extraction method, our easy partnership evident in every frame. Orders flooded in, $9,400 in the first month, exceeding our projections by 30%. I established the Honey Ridge Heritage label, featuring Grandpa Henry's sketch of the original farmhouse. Thomas taught me his honey extraction methods, passed down through generations of beekeepers. Each evening ended with us on the porch, watching bees return to their hives as darkness fell. You've got the touch, Thomas told me one evening. Henry said some people have it, some don't. Can't be taught. The television flickered to life the next morning as I sipped coffee. A local morning show played in the background until a familiar voice snapped my attention to the screen. Delia sat poised on a studio couch, gesturing animatedly. As co-founder of Honey Ridge Farm, our family business vision integrates traditional beekeeping with modern, sustainable practices. The mug slipped from my fingers, coffee splattering across the kitchen floor. I grabbed my phone, checking orders. 3 canceled since yesterday. A quick search revealed why. Customer confusion about ownership. Thomas found me still staring at the screen. Some people can't create, he said after I explained, so they take. Later that day, a package arrived. Inside, glossy business cards spelled out, Honey Ridge Farms, Delia Ross, CEO. The extras on farms, like a deliberate distortion of my grandfather's legacy. We should confront her publicly, Thomas suggested, anger tightening his usually calm features. Set the record straight. I ran my finger over Grandpa's sketch on our honey label. No, we'll let Honey Ridge speak for itself at the Harvest Festival. That afternoon, I called our printer. The new labels arrived 3 days later, identical, except for one subtle addition beneath the farm name. Independent, family-free ownership, since 1974. Thomas read it and laughed for the first time in days. Henry would have loved that. I stuck the label on our first festival jar, sunlight catching the golden honey inside. Let's see her try to claim this now. The night before the Harvest Festival in October, I applied a small dot of beeswax to seal each of the handwritten labels on our special sage blend honey jars. Thomas had found Grandpa Henry's formula tucked between the pages of his beekeeping journal last month. When we sampled it, the complex flavor took me straight back to summer evenings on his porch. Hand me that wood polish, Thomas said, buffing the aged wooden sign that once hung over Grandpa's roadside stand. Honey Ridge Farm. EST 1974. It gleamed in the workshop light, the letters almost singing with fresh oil. I slid over the cloth. The booth looks perfect. Not done yet. Thomas reached behind the workbench and produced a small brass plaque he'd mounted to the bottom of the sign. It read, Miriam Ross, owner and beekeeper. My throat tightened. Thomas. Henry would be proud of the real owner. Thomas tapped the edge of an envelope on the workbench. Speaking of which, I opened it, my hands trembling slightly. It was the final bank transfer receipt, the remaining payment to my family, delivered 3 months ahead of schedule. The deed transfer paperwork sat beside it, ready for tomorrow's notary appointment. We did it, I whispered. Thomas nodded. You did it. A newspaper clipping sat nearby. Local entrepreneur revives family legacy, with my photo beside the rebuilt hives. The accompanying booth application listed just 2 names, Miriam Ross and Thomas Hale. Get some sleep, Thomas said, returning to his polishing. Tomorrow's your day. Morning arrived with unexpected brilliance. The festival grounds already swarmed with activity as we set up, our rustic booth standing out among the sleek commercial displays with their digital signage and uniformed staff. "Over here," called a reporter from the Silverton Record, notebook in hand. "Can you tell us about your family business revival?" Before I could answer, Thomas gently steered her toward our display. "Wait till you taste this," he said, offering a sample of our heritage blend. Traditional method, no heat processing, no industrial filters. The woman's eyes widened at the first taste. "That's remarkable." The crowd grew steadily, pulling in curious onlookers who formed a line 6 people deep. Thomas demonstrated an old-fashioned extraction technique while I handled transactions, the cash box filling faster than I dared hope. "Is this the local honey everyone's talking about?" An older gentleman with a festival judge ribbon leaned forward, examining our display. "Yes, sir, 5th-generation bees." I offered him a sample of Grandpa's sage blend. Then I spotted them before they saw me. Dad's silver-streaked hair, Mom's pearl earrings, Delia's designer sunglasses. They paused at the edge of the crowd, scanning the unexpected throng around our booth. Delia strode forward, slipping between customers. "Sorry, coming through." She positioned herself beside me, extending her hand to a customer. "Delia Ross, so glad you're enjoying our honey." The woman looked confused. "Oh, you work here too?" "Family business," Delia beamed. "I handle the business side while my sister manages production." A festival coordinator approached with a local TV crew in tow. "We'd like to feature Honey Ridge in our broadcast. Could we speak with the owner?" "Of course." Delia stepped forward. The coordinator glanced at his clipboard. "That would be Miriam Ross?" "Right here," I said quietly, stepping from behind the cash box. The reporter turned to Thomas, who was demonstrating how to test honey viscosity. "And you must be the founder?" Thomas chuckled, his weathered face crinkling. "No, ma'am, just the caretaker. For Henry, and now for his granddaughter." Delia edged into frame as the camera started rolling. The reporter continued interviewing me about the farm's revival, and I caught Mom nudging Dad, their expressions a mixture of surprise and calculation. A customer pointed to Delia. "You must be so proud of your sister's achievement." Delia's smile froze. "We're all very invested in the farm's success." When the photographer from Agricultural Quarterly asked for photos, I casually unfolded the paid-in-full land contract across our display table. The camera clicked, capturing Delia's tight smile as the festival judge returned, a blue ribbon in hand. "Heritage Revival Award," he announced, pinning it to our booth. "Best traditional product and presentation." Dad approached awkwardly. "Congratulations, Miriam. We didn't realize you'd made such progress." "Thank you." I kept arranging jars, not meeting his eyes. Mom hovered nearby, fingering the blue ribbon. The booth looks charming. As the afternoon progressed, local business owners slipped me their cards. "We'd love to stock your honey at Riverdale Market." The Westfield B&B wanted to feature local products in guest welcome baskets. A representative from the Agricultural Extension Office discussed potential grant opportunities for heritage breed preservation. "Your grandfather's queen breeding program has historical significance. We should talk about conservation funding." During a brief lull, Delia cornered me behind the booth. "You could have included me." Her voice dropped to a hiss. "I've been offering to help for months." I met her gaze steadily. "Like you included me in your successes?" The words came out calmer than I felt. "All those awards ceremonies I attended. All those congratulations I offered. You never once thought to share the spotlight." "That was different. My achievements were individual, just like mine." I turned to help a customer. Thomas stepped between us, sample tray in hand. "Fresh batch just arrived," he told the waiting customers, then added quietly, "Family doesn't always share blood, sometimes just purpose." Delia's expression hardened. She rejoined our parents, who stood awkwardly at the edge of the continuing crowd. As they walked away, Delia glanced back at the thriving booth, at the customers eagerly purchasing jars of honey, at Thomas and me working in seamless coordination. I exhaled slowly, tension draining from my shoulders. "You okay?" Thomas asked, sliding another tray of samples onto the table. I nodded, watching my family's retreating backs. I think I finally am. When December came, the farmhouse windows rattled against a wind that carried ice instead of air. I pressed my palm against the cold glass, watching the snow blanket Honey Ridge farm in white silence. My phone vibrated on the counter, the hospital calling again. Miss Ross? Thomas's condition has worsened overnight. The pneumonia isn't responding to the initial treatment. My throat tightened. I'll be right there. I grabbed my coat and the small jar from the kitchen shelf. Late-season honey, amber gold and thick. The last batch Thomas and I harvested before his cough turned from annoying to alarming. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and fear. Thomas looked smaller somehow, oxygen tubes threading from his nose, monitors beeping their mechanical lullaby. His weathered hands rested atop white sheets, strangely still without their usual purpose. "You brought the good stuff," he whispered when he saw the jar, his voice scraping like winter branches against a window. The wildflower batch, Grandpa's favorite. I placed it on his bedside table, twisting the lid open so the sweet scent might combat the hospital's sterility. Thomas shifted, wincing with the effort. January's the hardest month for the bees. You'll need to check the ventilation holes, clear any dead bees from the entrances after snowfall. I've got it covered, I said, though worry not at my certainty. The syrup ratio changes in deep winter. 2-to-1, not 1-to-1. His breathing caught, triggering a coughing spell that left him exhausted. Save your strength, I urged, but Thomas shook his head. The colonies need you now. His eyes, though clouded with fever, fixed on mine with startling clarity. Don't forget to eat dinner yourself. You forget when you're working. I pulled out a notebook, writing down every instruction while fighting back tears. I promised to follow every step. Thomas nodded, satisfied. I showed him photos of Honey Ridge on my phone, the hives wrapped in their winter insulation, the workshop organized just as he taught me, the new queen-rearing equipment we'd ordered before he fell ill. Henry would be proud, he said, his calloused fingertip hovering over the screen, of both of us. My phone interrupted with a text from Mom, thinking about hosting family Christmas at the farm this year. The property photographs beautifully in snow. I silenced the phone without responding. When a nurse came to check Thomas's vitals, I stepped outside to find 3 missed calls from Delia. Her voicemail played with manufactured enthusiasm. "Mir, I've got a fantastic photographer who could do a professional shoot for the brand. Thinking we should revamp the marketing strategy before spring." An email notification followed, a business proposal for Ross Family Apiaries, with Delia's marketing firm handling distribution. The sudden interest in Honey Ridge burned like winter wind against exposed skin. 6 months of silence while I rebuilt what they'd written off, and now they wanted to claim it. The nurse touched my shoulder. "He's asking for you." I spent the evening reading Grandpa Henry's journals aloud to Thomas. The faded handwriting described winters from decades past, techniques for helping colonies survive bitter cold, observations of bee behavior during January thaws. Thomas closed his eyes, not sleeping but remembering, occasionally murmuring clarifications or adding details Henry had omitted. Mom called again while I was leaving the hospital. "We need to discuss Christmas plans." "Your father thinks." "I can't talk now," I interrupted. "I need to check the hives during this snowstorm." "In this weather? That's ridiculous." "The bees don't care what's ridiculous. They need me." I hung up, driving straight to Honey Ridge through thickening snow. I cleared entrances by flashlight, checked windbreaks, and adjusted winter wrappings according to Thomas's instructions. My fingers went numb, but I worked until every hive was secure. Thomas slipped away 2 weeks after Christmas, during the worst January snowfall in 15 years. I was holding his hand when his breathing changed, slowed, stopped. The hospital window showed a world transformed into white, as if the snow might soften the sharp edges of loss. We held a small memorial service in the farm workshop once the roads cleared. Just a handful of local beekeepers, Mrs. Jenkins from next door, and the hardware store owner who'd extended credit during our lean months. No family, though I'd sent the details. I hung Thomas's worn beekeeper's hat on the wall beside Grandpa's photograph. The 2 men who believed in me when no one else would. Not everyone born family stays family, I whispered to the empty workshop after the others left. Winter solitude settled over Honey Ridge like another layer of snow. I cared for the bees alone, learning to trust my instincts without Thomas's guidance. Each morning I checked every hive, my routine meticulous, finding comfort in the methodical work. While organizing Thomas's few belongings from the workshop desk, I discovered a folder of handwritten notes, future plans for Honey Ridge, breeding programs for strengthening our queen lines, expansion possibilities he'd been researching, his final gift. Contact information for a regional organic co-op with a post-it note attached, when you're ready. Spring arrived with unexpected visitors. I was inspecting a newly active hive when tires crunched on gravel. My parents' luxury SUV pulled up beside Delia's sleek company car. There she is. Dad called out as if we'd parted on good terms months ago. We're here to help with the business. Mom surveyed the property with appraising eyes. We've been discussing ways to modernize the operation. Delia has connections with distribution channels in Portland. Delia held out a glossy folder. I've drafted a marketing proposal. See how I've positioned the Ross family legacy angle? My name fits perfectly in the executive leadership section. I closed the hive carefully before standing to face them. Without speaking, I gestured for them to follow me. I walked them through the thriving apiary, past the expanded extraction room, to the workshop where Thomas's memorial sat alongside Grandpa's. Honey Ridge isn't a family business, I said finally, my voice steady. It's my promise to two men who believed in me. I pointed to Thomas's hat, to Grandpa's photograph. They taught me that some things aren't measured in dollars or corporate connections. They're measured in honest work and keeping your word. Dad started to argue, but stopped at something he saw in my face. Mom's smile faltered, her eyes starting to Delia for support. You can't run this alone, Delia insisted, though uncertainty crept into her voice. I'm not alone. I gestured to the bees working in the spring sunshine, to the farm coming back to life. I never was. They left without the confrontation I expected, Mom glancing back once with an expression I couldn't quite read. Delia stormed to her car without looking back. I returned to the hives, where thousands of workers continued their ancient dance of survival and creation, indifferent to human drama, focused only on what sustained them, just as Thomas taught me. I stand at the edge of the flowering meadow, watching 36 hives pulse with life as the summer sun warms the backs of my honeybees. A year has transformed Honey Ridge from a forgotten inheritance to the talk of Silverton County. Wildflowers sway in the gentle breeze, a living testament to what stubbornness and belief can create. Miss Ross? The school group is here, calls Melissa, the agricultural student I hired last spring. Her enthusiasm reminds me of myself at 8, wide-eyed in Grandpa's workshop. Coming. I answer, straightening my work shirt. The Sustainable Agriculture Stewardship plaque catches the sunlight from its place beside the extraction room door. Validation I never sought, but welcome all the same. Inside the expanded honey shed, stainless steel equipment gleams where rust and cobwebs once claimed territory. Children from Silverton Elementary press their noses against observation windows as worker bees deposit their golden treasure. Their teacher, Mrs. Patterson, catches my eye and nods with approval. The same woman who taught me in 5th grade now brings her students to learn about ecosystems from me. Who can tell me why bees dance? I ask, slipping into the rhythm of the workshop tour I've given dozens of times now. A boy in a red baseball cap raises his hand. To tell other bees where the good flowers are. Exactly right. I smile, pointing to the observation hive where forager bees perform their ancient figure-8 waltz. Just like people share good news with friends. When the tour ends, a familiar silver sedan pulls into the drive. My stomach tightens as Delia steps out, her designer heels sinking slightly into the gravel. She's alone this time, no parents flanking her like twin shields. Your workshop looked impressive, she says, glancing around the property with new eyes. National Organic Certification. Your name in that agriculture magazine. Not bad for a deadbeat farm. I don't rise to the bait. Thanks for coming. What can I do for you? She fidgets with her car keys. I should have supported you from the start. The words hang between us, unexpected and tentative. I wait, letting silence draw out what lies beneath. I was jealous, she continues, swallowing hard, of your independence, your courage to just leap. You built something real while I've been chasing promotions that don't matter. Her admission washes over me without the vindication I once imagined. Instead, I feel only the weight of wasted years. Want a tour? I offer, gesturing toward the apiary. We walk the rows of white hives named for constellations, Grandpa's way of mapping his world. The tension between us thaws with each step. These are Thomas's modifications, I explain, showing her the ventilation system he designed before his passing. He changed the whole game for winter survival rates. Mom and Dad never mention him, Delia says quietly, like they want to forget anyone who proved them wrong. Sunlight catches in her hair, the same shade as mine, as she stops to watch bees return laden with pollen. For a moment, I glimpse the sister I might have had. I was thinking we could start over, she suggests. Sister to sister, no business, just family. The old Miriam would have jumped at this olive branch, starved for approval. But the woman who coaxed Grandpa's queens back to life knows better now. Family isn't taken, Delia. It's earned. Her face falls slightly, but she nods. Fair enough. At the honey house, I hand her a small jar with a special gold label, Grandpa's Sage Blend. We found his recipe in the old journals. She studies the jar, then meets my eyes. Will I ever be welcome here again? You're welcome as a visitor, I tell her honestly. Not as an owner. Some things can't be shared until trust is rebuilt. After she leaves, I walk to the apple tree where Grandpa's wooden bench now stands, restored. Thomas's straw hat hangs from a low branch beside me, my daily reminder of promises kept. The conservation easement papers sit in my lap, ensuring this land remains agricultural for generations. I open Grandpa's journal to the inscription I read each evening, patience outlasts ridicule. Truth outlives lies. Golden light filters through apple blossoms as I watch my bees return home. Workshop laughter drifts from the honey house where visitors gather. 36 hives hum with life. Each queen descended from Grandpa's original strain. Grandpa planted. Thomas tended. I just learned to believe, I whisper to the fading day. Across the field, jars of honey catch sunset light through the workshop window, transforming ordinary glass into vessels of liquid gold and good things. They always find their way back.